So the province of BC is opening a forest trade office in London, England. It's supposed to diversify markets and protect jobs. It's the province's answer to US tariffs, a plan to find new buyers overseas. Sounds bold until you remember what's actually happening here at home. You can't export what you don't have. BC's harvest has crashed 43% in less than a decade. Provincial forest revenues have collapsed 63% in a single year. Mills are shuttered, people are out of work. And instead of fixing the root problem, the land, the law, and the ownership model, BC is opening an office on the other side of the ocean to sell what's left. Let's look at exports. In 2023, 59% of BC's forest product exports went to the United States. 21% went to China, 9% went to Japan. And here's the BC government's pitch. Tariffs from the US are too high, so let's sell to the UK instead. Forest Minister Ravi Parmar says this will open doors for BC wood in new markets. But let's check the math. In 2023, BC's total forest exports dropped 27%, from 15.5 billion to 11.3 billion. Exports to the US down 30%. Japan, 49% down. China, 11% down. Meanwhile, the US Department of Commerce keeps our softwood tariffs between 13% and 25%. And Trump's trade team is pushing for 35% or higher. So is the UK a shiny new market? No. Right now, it's less than 1% of BC's forest exports. 1%. You could triple that and still not make up for the loss from the US. And even if Britain wanted our wood, they already buy from Sweden, Finland, and the Baltics, where they get cheaper shipping, certified forests, and better logistics. So it's not diversification, it's denial dressed up as strategy. Even with Ottawa's $1.2 billion Forestry Transition Fund, championed by Prime Minister Mark Carney, a London office won't fix a dying resource base. There is no new market for what no longer exists. You can't PR your way out of depletion. In the most recent coverage, Washington is hiking the tolls again, 26 to 47% duties, with threats of another 10% piled on. So BC's plan is PR coordination and a working group, not to change how forests are managed, just to cushion the fall. No mention of the supply collapse due to exhausted forests and how that is the root of the issue. So let's talk about the supply collapse. Every time the government talks about forestry, they make it sound like a math problem. But it isn't just math. It's about the forest itself, the living system we've been drawing down like a bank account that never gets replenished. For decades, BC treated old growth like it would last forever. We cut faster than forests could recover, planted tree farms where ecosystems used to be, and called it sustainable. It wasn't. And the withdrawals have now caught up. The account's almost empty. What you're about to see isn't a slowdown. It's what it looks like when an industrial system fails. In 2015, the provincial cut was 68.6 million cubic meters of timber. In 2023, that number had fallen to 38.9 million cubic meters. In 2025, it's projected to drop to around 35 million cubic meters, the lowest harvest level in decades. That's not a dip, it's a collapse. The province still pretends the allowable annual cut is 75 million cubic meters. They can't even hit half that because the wood isn't there. The old high-value stands are gone. What's left is smaller, steeper, drier, further away, and often too close to drinking water zones or caribou habitat. On the ground, loggers call what's left in many of those second growth stands pecker poles. So now they're chasing disturbances, fire-burned and beetle-killed stands, post-disturbance logging, salvage. That's not forestry, that's scavenging. Now the government is even talking about logging in parks and conservation areas, disguising it as fire prevention. Cutting in parks is bottom of the barrel. Parks are the control group. That's the baseline for what a functioning ecosystem looks like. Lose that, and you lose the comparison point, keeps everything else honest. Meanwhile, the quality of what's left keeps sliding downhill. The hauling distances keep growing. The mills are getting less usable timber and lower dollar value out of each cubic meter of wood. And that's because the logs are coming in smaller, lower grade, or partially damaged. The province's own reports now show average stumpage down nearly 30% since 2018. And provincial forest revenue is down 63%, from 1.88 billion to 690 million. It's not just empty cupboards, that's structural failure. And it isn't just theory, it's already playing out elsewhere. Manitoba just learned what happens next. Fires there burned 2.1 million hectares in 2024, including 1.2 million hectares inside logging licenses. That's 10% of the forests they rely on. Their forestry royalties dropped by half in 2 years. Wildfire scientist Bob Gray said it best. Whole regions now have nothing but young trees. There's nothing left to harvest. You're chasing guts and feathers across the landscape. That's BC's reality if we keep pretending salvage logging is a business plan for an entire industry. Let's talk about the jobs myth. Dominic LeBlanc, the federal minister responsible for Canada-US trade, said, "The hour is grave. This is a critical industry to the fabric of the whole country." We're told forestry is the backbone of BC's economy. Let's check the spine. In 2023, forestry contributed 2% to the province's GDP. And there were 50,225 direct forestry jobs out of 2.7 million total jobs in the province. That's less than 2% of the total and shrinking fast. Since 2000, more than 60,000 forestry jobs are gone and 100 plus mills have closed. Interfor and Canfor, they're expanding in Alabama and Georgia. Western Forest Products, selling off assets. So when the province says it's protecting workers by opening a UK forestry office, ask which country those workers live in. The buzzword in government circles these days is value added. And that's actually where the new Forest Act wants to go, but not the way the province is doing it. So I'll tell you more about the new Forest Act in a minute. Right now, the province's Category 4 program under BC Timber Sales sets aside about 0.7 to 1.1 million cubic meters for small manufacturers. That's roughly 3% of the provincial harvest. The rest, about 97%, feeds the export-oriented industry. So that doesn't mean that 97% of it is literally exported as raw logs, but it goes to the large tenure holders whose output, lumber, pulp, and pellets, is overwhelmingly sold outside Canada. Here's how it breaks down. About 85% of BC lumber production is exported, mainly to the US, China, and Japan. The remainder is processed domestically. Now, it's true that logs slated for export must be advertised domestically for about 6 weeks. BC mills have first right of refusal. If no one buys, they can be exported. But an insider has told me this is how the system is fixed. Before big companies advertise wood for sale, they quietly offer certain mills about 10% of the volume at a discount, on the condition that they don't bid during the 6-week domestic period. So most of it ends up exported. You can't build a value-added sector when the rules still reward volume over value, and the system is fixed to favor big companies and their exports. Here's another problem. Under BC's current system, the companies don't get rewarded for how they log, only for how much they cut. The tenure system still ties their rights to volume. The more cubic meters they cut, the more likely they are to maintain their tenure. If they don't cut enough, the ministry can reduce their quota or reassign it. And the forest minister has warned them if they don't cut, he's coming for their fiber. Revenue is based on stumpage. That's a fee charged per cubic meter. So the province's budget literally depends on volume, not outcomes on the land. Stumpage rates are set before the wood is even milled, so there's no incentive to get higher value from each log. In other words, companies make money by moving logs, not by making things with them. The system rewards speed and volume, not skill, waste, not craftsmanship. That's why BC's forests are full of slash piles and our communities are full of empty mills. And here's one of the worst parts. This whole setup is being passed down like an heirloom nobody wants. As the big companies pull out, the province is handing some of what's left to First Nations under the same broken rules. The same volume quotas, the same race for fiber, the same dependency on exports. Now, this is a critique of policy design, not of the nations doing their best with the terms on offer. The Narwhal just ran a story about First Nations buying up licenses as the majors bail out. Some people are celebrating that as reconciliation, but listen closer to what the people in the story actually say. Gary Merkel, a First Nations forester, everybody's competing for the last little bit. Chief Christopher Roberts, it's just like the train is going and you can't stop it. These nations are being handed short-term, low-value, beetle kill tenures, the leftovers of a system in collapse. It's not empowerment, it's inheritance of debt. The province calls that progress. Merkel calls it what it is, fire sale. There's very little left. And he's right. Now here's what business as usual and ignoring limits is costing the people. 2018 Grand Forks flood, 165 million and counting. 2021 heat dome and floods, 10 to 17 billion. 2023 Okanagan fires, 720 million in insured costs. 2021 Fraser Valley floods, 3.4 billion federal recovery. These aren't natural disasters, they're man-made invoices. Industrial logging and road building disrupt watershed hydrology, accelerate runoff, and worsen floods. Logging old and primary forests increases wildfire severity by drying landscapes, creating fuel, and replacing diverse fire-resistant stands with uniform, highly flammable plantations. And here's the part they don't tell you. Every year, taxpayers are still propping this up. About 365 million in provincial subsidies to the forest industry. That's money we could be investing in restoration, small mills, guardians, stewardship, instead of bankrolling the same model that's driving the damage. The system is collapsing, but the government won't admit it outright. Instead, it rolls out ad campaigns, as if that's going to change Trump's mind. It doubles down on chasing disturbances, cutting burned forest and beetle kill, just to keep the numbers up. They call it fuel management or fire recovery. And it's really disaster chasing dressed up as policy. It launches shiny new funds, new offices, new promises, anything that keeps the illusion of motion alive. And they're doing all that instead of facing the structural problem. That BC's forests are exhausted and our laws are broken. They're patching this with tiny programs that sound good in press release, but don't change a thing on the ground. Category 4 timber sales, 3% of the cut. Manufacturing Jobs Fund, a few million. London Trade Office, more millions. None of this changes who controls the wood, who pays for the damage, or how much is left. It's busy work for a dying model. Structural problems need structural fixes. Here's what actually stabilizes forestry in BC. 1, lower the cut to within ecological limits immediately. 2, put the forest back in service of the community, not the corporation. 3, rebuild a value-added economy instead of a volume export economy. And 4, legislate accountability. So what replaces this broken system? The new Forest Act. The new Forest Act starts with reality. It's a proposal that was written by citizens, by forestry workers, by loggers, by people who are concerned about their ecosystems and their communities in BC. The new Forest Act accepts limits and rebuilds governance from the ground up. Community forest boards, not distant corporations, decide how to protect, restore, and harvest. Forests are treated as critical infrastructure, as vital to our future as hospitals, roads, or drinking water systems. They store water, prevent floods, and regulate the climate. And they only do that when at least 70 to 80% stays standing. That's the truth industry and government can't face. We can build what we need with far less than we take now. It's not sacrifice, survival with intelligence. All right, stay with me now because this is the part where some people start thinking I've lost it. I'm going to talk about cutting the harvest almost in half from the low place it is now, and somehow ending up with more jobs. But it's not magic, it's about math and seeking different outcomes on the ground. If we manage forests properly, we could drop the annual cut from 38.9 million cubic meters to around 20 million cubic meters a year, half of today's volume, but enough to build a future. How do we do that? The new Forest Act, the NFA model, doubles jobs per cubic meter and adds entirely new sectors: restoration, guardians and stewardship, science, and tourism. Here's what that looks like. These estimates were created using provincial data and existing projects. We didn't pull them out of thin air. Right now, BC averages about 1.3 or less direct jobs for every 1,000 cubic meters cut. The NFA model doubles that, closer to 2.5 jobs per 1,000 cubic meters. Jobs rise because the work changes. Nature-directed stewardship replaces mechanized clear-cutting with selective, locally processed, skill-intensive forestry that yields more jobs per cubic meter while keeping ecosystems intact. The result isn't fewer jobs, it's stable, higher value ones. Let's do the jobs breakdown. Cut less wood, employ more people. 40 to 50,000 stay in forestry, smaller mills, regional log sort yards. 10 to 20,000 restore watersheds and prevent billion-dollar floods. Thousands more are Indigenous guardians and stewards, scientists and rangers. And as the land heals, tourism grows. Our total comes to 60 to 85,000 jobs versus the 50,000 direct forestry jobs in BC right now. So this isn't fewer jobs, it's better ones. And this would be funded by what we already waste on fires, floods, and subsidies. They've had their chance to show us what this system can do, to show us what it can produce, and it sucks. Pull the plug on failure, end the experiment, build something sane. Now it's time to restore balance between land, people, and economy. We're building a new system around reality, stewardship, and common sense. The new Forest Act is the future. This is the only way this can go. You can't export your way out of a collapse. You can't market your way out of depletion. The only value we'll get from forests from here on out will come from seeing them as critical infrastructure, systems that serve us best when most of them are left standing. The old model is over. The new Forest Act is how we start over. It's how we turn the forest from a short-term commodity into a lasting public inheritance. Because this land isn't a commodity, it's our home. And it's time the law says so. So we've told the truth about what's happening to BC's forests. Now see the solution. The new Forest Act is how we protect watersheds, rebuild communities, and make forestry work again. Read it, share it, and if you can, support it at boundaryforest.org. Real change starts when people know what's possible.